Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to start learning about cognitive psychology. This particular study note is from EPG Pathshala, Government of India MHRD site. So I would like to express my sincere gratitude to them. In this study module, we are going to learn about understanding of what is cognitive psychology, describe different approaches through which cognitive psychology must be better understood, and some historical background we are going to deal with, then learn current scenarios of cognitive psychology. Cognitive psychology is referred as the study of human mental process and their further role in thinking, feeling, and on the behavior of humans. The core focus of cognitive psychology is on perception, thinking, and acquisition of knowledge, judgment, comprehension, and production of language, problem solving, and decision making. This branch of psychology came into life at some point in after the fall of behaviorism. It also emerged immediately after the use of new technology, application of abstract concepts, and neuroscience. The cognitive approach has permitted existing psychology with its scientific representation of the complex human psyche. It has helped to use and apply this knowledge in the treatment of human diseases and dysfunction. Definition of cognitive psychology. Cognitive psychology concerns with the scientific understanding of how people may perceive, understand, evaluate, and think in relation to the complexities and significance of mind. The focuses of cognitive physiology have always been to access the science of mental life. Cognitive psychology exerts a strong influence on psychology as a whole, and its more inclusive partner is cognitive science, which is a unified program for studying the mind. Mind is the processor of information from our senses and helps in understanding and transmission of information to others. If this processing is not allowed, then the information may not be processed in meaningful ways. For example, in dyslexia, a child who might struggles in school because of its impairment in ability to fluently read the English text, a disorder which is called a dyslexia. It is a learning disorder that does not allow transforming printed characters into meaningful pieces of information. Cognitive psychologists measure the behaviors in laboratory so that they can reach to concrete conclusions about the covered mental processes. Therefore, experimental method is the heart of cognitive psychology. The main goal of cognitive psychology has always been to explain how humans transform input into thoughts and actions with the use of complex and often mysterious process of cognition. This human psychology may not be possible to understand without focusing on cognitive psychology. With the use of computational metaphors, cognitive psychology greatly benefited in its research domain by work in the area of artificial intelligence. This further led to development of another subject for study, cognitive science, which attempts to integrate a range of approaches in research on the mind and mental processes. The key milestones in the development of cognitive psychology would really help in understanding its journey. It would help in understanding its crumpling behaviorism, computer metaphors, and information processing, abstract intelligence, or other schools of thought. Approaches of cognitive psychology, information processing approach. It is a way by which the information from the environment is processed by series of stages or processing systems. For example, when a stimulus is presented, our basic perceptual process occur, which is further followed by our attentional processes. This information, which has been the focus through our attentional process, gets transferred to our short-term memory. This information is further transferred to the long-term memory store, perception, attention, and memory. This model has been used to cognitive psychologists since decades as it makes sense and is easy to understand. The assumptions of information processing approach. Cognition can be understood by analyzing it into series of sequential stages with the help of processing systems. The system alters the incoming information, which can lead to unique processing in each stage. For example, at the perceptual stage, coding of information take place. In the memory stage, recall of information, which further enhances our concept formation, judgment, etc. The goal of this model is to specify the processes and structures. Since each component is related to the next stage, therefore it becomes difficult to identify which stage comes at an initial level. It should be very clear that the initial stage is always the incoming information, which is processed into stages for unique functions. There is also a very crucial limitation towards this approach. It has been observed that processing is often affected substantially by the individual's past experiences and its expectations. Therefore, the stimuli intrude the organism that is inactive or either not prepared to process the incoming information. There are different ways by which one can investigate cognitive psychology. They are termed as traditional ways of obtaining evidence from human cognition. These include experimental cognitive psychology, cognitive neuropsychology, and cognitive neuroscience, which is explained in the next module. We will learn that. Let us focus on the other two, which follows as experimental cognitive psychology. Experimental methods measure the behavior that have always been the strong point of cognitive psychology. If one would measure the behavior of humans, it can help to explain about the cognitive process which are involved in it. During a true experiment, a researcher manipulates one of the variables in order to set its effect on another variable. For example, we would like to know whether background noise affects performance on math problem or not. In this, two different groups would be randomly assigned to either a noise group or to with noise group. The initial group will be asked to solve math problems in a quiet environment, and whereas the second group tries to solve the problems when they are being exposed to some sound. Let's say a bell, that would be termed as with noise. In this example, the presence absence of noise is referred to as the independent variable. Our end result measure is referred to as the dependent variable. In physiological methods of cognitive neuropsychology, besides measuring the behavior of individuals, psychological measures are also very important. Don't bother the background noise, sorry for that. Besides measuring the behavior of individuals, physiological measures are also very important. So bodily systems such as brain activity, eye movements, blood pressure and heart rate, etc. are also being used in experiments to understand the cognitive processes. Some of the methods which are relevant in understanding it are electroencephalogram, neuroimaging, and brain lesions. So electroencephalogram EEG is a multi-channel recording of the uninterrupted electrical activity of the brain. It is measured with the multi-channel recorder that helps in detecting the voltage channels which are being generated by the large number of neurons. A large number of electrodes are placed on the scalp. The frequency will depend on the activity of the brain, whether it is awake and alert, relaxed, and even the different stages of sleep. So all these things comes under electroencephalogram, EEG. The problem with this method is that it does not specify the exact location of neural activity that generates the evoked potentials. For this, other methods are required. Like neuroimaging begins where EEG is not able to help in specifying the exact locations. Neuroimaging measures the location of neural activity generated during a cognitive task. There are different techniques which can provide an indirect measure of more localized brain activity as compared with electrical scalp recordings. Magnetic resonance imaging, MRI scan, we might have already heard about this, a strong magnetic pulse that causes molecules in the brain to move. Motion of these molecules are picked up as radio frequencies and reconstructed in 3D images. MRI has better resolution than CT scans. No structure function relationship can be seen in it though. Another technique is positron emission tomography, or PET. In this method, increased radio-labeled glucose activity is scanned in the brain while subjects engage in different cognitive processes. Spatial resolution is seen to be good where temporal resolutions are not as specified. Third technique for assessment for localized areas is through functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI. It helps to detect changes in blood flow to particular areas of the brain where these areas are active. It provides both an anatomical and a functional view of the brain. Unlike the PET scan, it is non-invasive and provides a better spatial and temporal resolution. Brain lesions is a very old technique for studying the diverse functions of the brain. It helps to observe individuals who have suffered damage to the brain tissue through accidents, strokes, and also some of the brain diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's diseases. Lesions provide a different way to study the cognitive functions provided by the brain. It was not until World War II that physicians started to document disorders that were caused by damage to certain regions of the brain. Which brain region engage in what kind of cognitive function is helpful in understanding the exact causes of dysfunctions. In connectionist model, an alternative approach to more traditional information processing approach is connectionisms. It is intended to capture the fundamental cognitive process as they might be instantiated instantiated by brain. So neurons are the elementary units of the brain which are further interconnected with each other. Neurons in the brain. So connectionist networks are the models of neural networks as they might exist in the brain. The two basic connectionist ideas are the information can be broken down into elementary units or neurons, and that they are connections between these neurons. They can be of different strengths which can be further modified with the units. The connection is only possible if both the neurons are firing at the same time. Another assumption of connectionist models is that many connections can be active at the same time. It is a clear example of parallel processing as opposed to serial processing, which is restricted to only one connection operating at a time. Thus, another name of the connectionist model is parallel distributed processing. Detailed discussion in memory module. History of cognitive psychology. Early recognition research. Experiments in cognitive psychology were being carried out over a century ago. Philosophers were also showing keen interest in the cognitive process, but until late 19th century, only their first attempts were made to bring cognitive process into the laboratory. This helped in studying these concepts in the light of scientific stream. Important discoveries emerged, especially in the fields of perception and attention and learning. The work carried at this juncture was mainly focusing on the basic cognitive process, which in turn led to the development of theories and experimental design of today. It was seen that the research carried during this time could be applied to real life settings, but their main purpose of their research was not meant to be this. For example, some scientists carried out experiment on spaced learning and massed learning, where it is shown that though experiments that learning can be improved if some rest is in provided. It leads to less fatigue and better concentration. This then become a widely used strategies to improve the efficiency of learning, like Pomodoro techniques. You might have already tested that. However, cognitive researchers were, if not, try that. Okay, it will be beneficial for you. So cognitive researchers were mostly concerned with pure research, and any practical application were considered to be largely incidental. Parletter 1932 challenged this approach of cognitive psychology and argued that a cognitive researcher should focus on the relevance of the real world also. He further suggested that cognitive researchers should make use of more naturalistic experimental designs and test those materials which are based on situations or even resemble real life situations. He contributed his thought by using pictures and stories in the research work of memory, such as the testimony of courtroom witnesses. Therefore, his research had a lasting impact on the stream of cognitive psychology. Post-war development of cognitive psychology. The modern era of cognitive psychology started due to World War II. The war produced major changes in the technology side and extraordinary efforts from humans to deal with these changes. Therefore, introduction of new or advanced equipments made the need to understand the capabilities and limitations of human operators more important. A new goal emerged then to access the performance and attention of humans, and also led to the development of artificial intelligence during this phase. A British psychologist, Donald Broadbent, who was a pilot trainer during the war, a British psychologist, Donald Broadbent, who is a pilot trainer during the war and therefore had first-hand experience of the cognitive problems encountered at that time by most of the pilots, were referred as pioneer of new wave of applied research. Broadbent in 1958 became more interested in exploring the information processing capabilities of human being. The abilities to deal with two or more competing perceptual inputs faced by humans simultaneously were especially focused on. To investigate further on this, he established a technique to assess the basic limitation of human attention, and he was able to apply his findings to assisting the performance of the pilots. The year 1956 was critical in the development of cognitive psychology. According to Anderson, in 1995, cognitive psychology first emerged in the 2 decades between 1950 and 1970. The field of artificial intelligence was founded in 1956 by Chomsky. It was this year which witnessed a scientist's name. I'm not sure about the pronunciation. Sorry for that. It was this year which witnessed the emergence of both cognitive psychology and cognitive science. In 1967, the word cognitive psychology was first used by American psychologist Erlich Neisser in his book Cognitive Psychology. Neisser is termed as the father of cognitive psychology. According to Neisser, cognition involves all process by which the sensory input is transformed, reduced, elaborated, stored, recovered, and used. It is concerned with these processes even when they operate in the absence of relevant stimulation, as in images and hallucinations. Thus, it is apparent that all psychological phenomena are related to cognitive aspects. Neisser always explained that cognitive psychology is as an assault on behaviorism. He was uncomfortable with behaviorism because he considered behaviorist assumptions to be wrong. Psychosis, structuralism, psychophysics, structuralism, functionalism, and behaviorism all contributed to the development of cognition. They had their own strengths and weaknesses attached to them. One of the major schools of psychology that had major impact on cognitive psychology is the thought of behaviorism. So, behaviorism, the work of Pavlov, Skinner, and Watson, contributed a lot on the growth of this area from 1930s to 1960s. Watson focused more on observable behavior and was keen to move physiological research from a laboratory into the real world. He disliked the approach of introspection and functionalist aspect approach and recommended that thoughts and feelings must be dropped from study of psychology and as they are not directly observed. He was very much interested in how people react in everyday life and what can influence them. The main focus of psychology this should be scientific and objective, and by this they meant that its subjective matter should be publicly observable. Therefore, the emphasis on psychology should be on scientific basis. On the other hand, Skinner was focusing on the relationship of stimuli, response, and reinforcement as its critical issues of psychology. Skinner focused his attention mainly on schedules of reinforcement and demonstrated that related learning curves could be obtained from an array of different animals. The principles of reinforcement could further explain aspects of human learning and behavior. For Skinner, this theory of reinforcement determined the behavior of human beings as that of laboratory rats. Skinner was later criticized on his book Verbal Behavior in 1957 by the linguist Noam Chomsky in 1959. The debate was about the extent to which language was an innate ability and how the environment might shape language development. Therefore, Skinner drastically failed to account for the generativity of language, which is the creation of novel utterance. Another limitation for behaviorism was the failure to consider inventing mental processes. Intervening mental process. Behaviorists were focused on the stimulus response relationship. On the other hand, cognitive psychology was addressing the mental processes which are attached to any stimulus. For example, memorize a list of words. Next step would be recall of those words. But if mental processes are playing a role, It would lead to grouping, organizing, and categorization of information. Cognitive psychology makes inferences about mental processes. Structuralism. Structuralism described the components of consciousness which were aimed to describe the elemental components such as sensation, images, and feelings. According to this school of thought, consciousness was considered to be the proper subject matter of psychology. Therefore, structuralism was based on the method of introspection, which was initiated by Woods and developed by Teishner. Introspection is a righteous, controlled procedure for discovering sensations and feelings experienced continuously. It was believed that consciousness could best be assessed through self observation. The fundamental problem with this method, of course, is that it is by definition subjective and perception of the same visual stimulus might be different for two persons. Teishner and student of Wood advanced his research on structuralism. He intended to determine basic building blocks of human experience. He felt interception was the only appropriate procedure for psychology. Structuralism was soon considered to be an invalid approach. So, insistence on introspective method was problematic as the data was inherently subjective because the results were invalid. Such biases resulted in problems with reliability as there was no agreement between the laboratory and observers. Results were considered to be non-reliable. Then functionalism. Functionalism was a philosophy opposing the prevailing structuralism of physiology of the late 19th century. One of the major proponents of functionalism was Thorndike, who has been ever popular for puzzle box. He was considered to study the primary issues of functionalism. The school of thought also focused on observable events as opposed to unobservable events like what goes on in someone's mind. William James is considered to be the founder of functional psychology. So, functionalism concentrated on the mind rather than its structural components. It emerged as a replacement to deal with the problems of structuralism. It was based on the scientific approach that everything existed because it serves some function or another. First, the practical application of this knowledge was considered to be very important. It was the major contribution of functionalism to cognitive psychology. It focused on mental processes and its relationship with the environment and how individuals adapted to the situations within the environment. It also helps translate the relevance of experimental psychology to other human endeavors. Behaviorists also discarded the method of introspection but also criticized functionalism for the reason that it was not based on controlled experiments. Functionalists also influenced the educational system, especially with regards to John Dewey's belief that children should learn at the level for which they are developmentally prepared. World War II brought about many changes in the understanding of human psychology. It inspired towards presenting dissatisfaction against the behaviorist approach, as there was a need to solve the problems being encountered by the military at a practical base. If one has to understand, it was seen that many of the problems were of cognitive nature, like fatigue, demands of constant vigilance during the war and post war years. Technology development had a large impact on psychology. There was a constant need for resurgence in research and theories focusing on human attention. Telephone conversations were also seen to be important in understanding human information processing. Computer metaphors. The remarkable increase of research in the area of cognition has been acclaimed since the revolution in the 20th century psychology. This further led to the development of digital computers, which made psychologists accessible to both a plausible metaphor, the mind as a computational system, and also an innovative method for the investigation of the mind, the beginning of the computer and the ability by which it could store information and further transform this symbolic information is similar to that of cognitive processing. A computer can be like a brain in that it can receive input, encode the material, and further helps in the storage and retrieval of the information. For cognitive psychology, the mind was termed as computer. Therefore, it has been observed that as the mind is managed by programs or sets of rules analogs, is it in the same manner to that of computers. Computer is termed as a physical symbol system, which is further capable of having an and manipulating symbols. These metaphors become a composite of characteristics shared by humankind and machine. As a result of computer becomes hard for cognitive psychology. Then artificial intelligence. Machines or programs which use intelligence to solve complex problems are in the same manner as humans use in solving problems. Examples would be computers doing medical diagnosis, flying jet planes, playing chess, etc. Artificial intelligence and essence involves making programs and devices that are efficient, flexible, and learn through experience. They may not be as similar in their approach as human consciousness. It influences the contemporary thoughts on logic and behavior and greatly supported the idea that abstract constructs are very much useful in the scientific process. Artificial intelligence offered a glimpse into how we can infer the existence of unobservable processes based on the product of behavior. There are two main objectives of AI research. The first is to make computers more useful to people. The second is to explore the principles that help to make intelligence possible. Phrased differently, AI researchers with the previous goal tend to be interested in developing intelligent machines, whereas those with the later aim seek to create intelligent machines. AI and cognitive psychology are interlinked, as Sol Tzu says, a kind of symbiotic relationship, each profiting from the development of the other. For example, cognitive psychology can direct AI in the recognition of cognitive structures and processes that can ultimately be implemented as part of an AI based model. Conversely, AI can provide computational conceptual tools that are necessary to formalize assumptions about representation and process. Therefore, was seen that Glass et al. Believed that whereas AI explores the general questions of how intelligent systems can operate, cognitive psychology therefore deals with an intelligent system which might be termed as human being. So we learned this and we are having a quick summary about all these things we learned in this video. Cognitive psychology is referred to as the study of human mental processes and therefore play a major role in thinking, feeling, and the behavior of humans. The information processing model has dominated cognitive psychology, where cognition can be understood only by analyzing it into series of sequential stages with the help of processing systems. They could further be investigated with the help of experimental methods and physiological ways. Parallel distributed processing, or PDP, is a model of cognition in which information is thought to be processed in a similar way as the neurological networks. Cognitive psychology has a relatively long history and continues to make many connections with other disciplines. Then Bartlett emphasized the role of real life research and left a lasting impact on the stream of cognitive research. In the modern era, Donald Broadbent investigated the impact of introduction of new technologies on perceptual processes of humans. The introduction of the word cognitive physiology came with the publication of a book in 1967 by American psychologist Erlich Neisser. He critically opposed the work of behaviorists. So, different schools of psychology that had major impact on cognitive psychology at that time were behaviorist, structuralism, and functionalist. Each of these schools tried and explained the critical questions that need to be focused on cognitive psychology. The neurocognitive revolution is influenced by modern developments in communication and computer technology. So, that's it. Thank you for listening.